And we are back with another episode of the Baseline Bums podcast. It is your host, Rob, aka B-Ball Archives. And once again, I am joined by my close friend, Adam.
It is good to be back. Happy to be here and excited to be on another episode of the podcast and share some more B-Ball knowledge with everyone.
Absolutely. We've got some really interesting topics today. We're talking about Westbrook off the bench. He started the season in the starting lineup. He shifted to the bench, and a lot of interesting things have happened because of it. So we're going to dive into that. We're also going to talk about Adam Silver's talks about a max salary cap and the upper salary limit that he is proposing. And so a lot of interesting details whenever you dissect that entire situation.
And that's a big one. So for those of you that, follow the NBA, that's a big topic that we're going to discuss that's going to impact the future of the league. So please tune in and stay around for that one.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And then we're going to be diving into one of our favorite topics and a topic about maybe the best duo of all time. And we're going to be talking about the breakup of Kobe and Shaq. So I'm really interested to see how we both frame this conversation.
Yeah, and that one's near and dear to the heart. Obviously, their prime coincided with kind of the emergence of the Spurs as a dynasty. So me and you were, big time basketball followers during that. So that's an exciting one to talk about. Looking forward to discussing all these. For those of you that have been following along with the podcast over the last several episodes, be sure to just give us a follow on all of our social media platforms, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, the Baseline Bubs podcast. Also check out Rob's page, B-Ball Archives on TikTok. He's got a huge following, a lot of really, really good content that he posts almost daily. So give all those a follow. We appreciate it, guys.
Absolutely. Let's just dive on in. Yeah, let's just talk some Laker chat right out the gate. We're going to be talking
Westbrook,
some Westbrook. So he started out the season in the starting lineup and was underperforming to say the least. He was barely scoring over 10 points a game. He was still rebounding at a decent clip, about 7 a game, but his assists were really down as well. And
Right.
everyone was pointing to, is he washed? How is this going to look moving forward? And obviously, we've seen the 5 games he's been playing. He's coming off the bench, and
Right.
and it looks like night and day.
Yeah, it's a big difference, right?
So, are you buying into the hype? Are you buying into Russell Westbrook coming off the bench? This is his new identity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I feel like you had to have seen this coming if you've been following just the Lakers since Darvin Ham took over. He alluded and brought up that this might be something that Russell Westbrook would have to do, come off the bench. And I hate that coming off the bench has to be viewed with such a negative connotation. Some amazing all-time players such as Manu Ginobili were elite players that came off the bench, and they came off the bench for a reason. It's because their skill set was better highlighted sometimes in another lineup. Their strengths they could actually use because they weren't being eaten up by other players in other lineups. And I think that's what you're saying with Russell Westbrook. I think that he's a guy that needs to have his ball in the hands to be his true self.
Yeah.
And you can't put the ball in his hands consistently whenever you're playing next to LeBron James and Anthony Davis. They need to have the ball more. They need to be with the 1 and 2 options. They need to be the alphas, right? So him playing off ball is not playing to his strengths. He can't shoot from 3. He still cannot, unfortunately. He's even though he's been making a couple more over the last few games, overall he's not a great 3-point shooter.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
that's one of the things I'm really not buying into, because he's shooting at a really excellent clip, and I don't think that is sustainable.
It's not.
But I think the energy that he's providing for that second unit, there's no reason why he can't come off the bench, play 25 plus minutes a game, even finish the game. No, I mean, there's a lot to be said about who starts the game, but I think who finishes the game is far more important. And so, I still think he could be out on the court, affecting the game when it matters the most in the fourth quarter, and still play a good, important, meaningful role. But that shooting, that's not sustainable. He's got to take it to the cup even more.
One thing I'll say is that just overall, Russell Westbrook has taken too much hate over the last couple of years, including for myself. He has done a lot for the league. He's been a fantastic player for a long, long time, right? And he deserves the respect. He still gives nothing but 110% every single time he plays, right?
Yeah.
I think this move to the bench should be permanent. And I think his inability to help space the floor means he needs to be on ball. And I think he's still, I don't think he'll ever improve his 3-point shot to the point where he can do that. He's been in the league too long and never developed it. But if he, to your point, he can be in the second unit. He can be a ball dominant guy and help teams. He's, I think, been shooting well over 50% over the last 2 weeks. I think he's averaging close to 20 a game. I mean, he's been putting up some really good numbers, and the Lakers did win a couple games. So
Yeah.
I think it's something that he's going to have to do, and I think it's something that does play to his strengths. And I don't see any other way around it. I'm interested in part because I don't envision him being with the Lakers long. So I'm curious to see what you think his life after this is and his next situation. Is he coming off the bench or is he a starter?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question in itself. Is Westbrook going to be a Laker for much longer? I don't foresee that being the reality. I think wherever he goes is a team that is looking at not being good in the near future and kind of just willing to take on that kind of money for that kind of player. And whenever I'm looking at that, he would be going to a team where he would be probably playing having a chance of being the most ball dominant person.
So do you still think he has that part of his career left in front of him? Because that's almost how I viewed like
No, I
the
don't.
Houston experiment to a little bit, how I viewed his Oklahoma City days after Durant was gone. It's like that was his attempt at still being the alpha. And I think that that time period's over for him to win. So I'm wondering if his next stop isn't in a very similar role, coming off the bench for a contender. Can he still do that? Is he showing enough in the second unit for a contender? Like think about Andrew Wiggins with Golden State. His career was like, hey, he kind of had been painted as just this inefficient semi bust. Honestly, he didn't live up to his expectations. And then he went to Golden State and all of a sudden, became a really good defender and more was brought out of him. Do you still think, I mean, he's a lot older obviously, but do you still think he has backup point guard ball dominant contributions on a potential playoff championship competing team?
Well, I think it depends on the team itself because like I think he's okay taking the role he's taking now because there's a legendary on ball player in LeBron James that is running that offense more often than not. And so I think if he was to go to a team that had an established playmaker such as LeBron, then I think, yeah, he would be able to sort of seed that and be like, you have a guy that can do it better than me. But I think that there's a handful of situations that are potentially the more likely situations where he would go and maybe not feel as confident in that. And because if he was to go to a team like let's say he comes to San Antonio, is he not supposed to step in and feel like he's the most dominant on-ball player in San Antonio?
Yeah, he probably would. I mean, he's that kind of guy.
Right, exactly. So like I wouldn't hold that against him if he was to feel that way. And so I think that there's some teams that where he would be comfortable being that
Like,
second guy. Like if he was to go to Denver. If he was to go to Denver.
I was just about to ask, could you see him being could you see Denver being like, hey, like we want you to be like our backup point guard and help be the alpha when Jokic isn't in there?
I think that could be a situation he would cede to a 2-time MVP, one
What
of the
about
best.
Milwaukee?
Yeah.
Like, could Milwaukee be like, hey, like you're going to come off the bench for us, play 20 minutes, and you're going to get to do what you want to do a lot?
Yeah, I mean,
Can he help a team like that?
On paper, it makes sense. On paper, it makes sense. But it's just about is he willing to accept that role? Because at the end of the day, Giannis doesn't really need to be ball dominant to score a lot because he can slash and get his points, pretty much wherever. And whenever you look at everyone else they have, there's really no one that's overly ball dominant other than Drew Holiday this season. He's been pretty ball
So I'm
dominant.
saying, like, past those top three guys, they don't. I mean, Brooke Lopez plays a lot off ball, catch and shoot. They don't run an offense through him.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to be able to see soon because he's an unrestricted free agent after this season. He had opted in as a player option for his last year, getting paid an absorbent amount of money. The market's going to set his price. If he's getting less than $10 million a year, it means he's coming off the bench.
Yeah.
There's only 31 starting point guard spots. If he's not going to be that starting point guard on a playoff team, the non-playoff teams are probably going to be developing a young guard. So his role is going to be 6-man off the bench for a contender if he wants one in the league, or at least a playoff team, a 6-man on some playoff team.
Yeah.
And I think he's showing enough right now to do it. He just needs to accept his role, like we were just talking about.
Yeah, and he's doing it. I mean, off the bench, he's averaging almost 19 a game, and seeing him shoot like almost had like a 58% true shooting is incredible. I don't think that what he's doing from three is going to be sustainable, but I still think he's got that explosiveness and he's got that ability to get to the basket. He's shown it time and time again. So
he just needs to cut down on his turnovers and have a little bit improved decision making to be trusted late game. But I'm happy for him that he's having some more success. I can only imagine the mental anguish that guy's had to go through with how much he's been scrutinized over the last couple of years. So good for him. Good for you, Russ. Hopefully you keep having success. That's all I gotta say.
Absolutely. It's definitely a good story to follow.
So speaking of him kind of being a free agent, that kind of leads into our next topic a little bit.
Yeah. We're gonna be talking about max salary cap. There's been some talk from Adam Silver, as the league is expanding and wanting to do things like add teams, and some of these things are very expensive. So he was talking about adding an upper salary limit to limit the amount teams would spend and essentially place the luxury cap that currently exists with a very firm hard cap that teams would not be allowed to not be allowed to pass. And so this would put a really hard bind on a lot of teams that are violating the luxury tax with impunity. Teams like the Warriors,
That's what I was going to say. That's obviously the biggest example of what Adam Silver's new direction and what they want to accomplish. And this is going to be a huge deal. I mean, the direction that they've discussed going has been met with drastic opposition from the NBA PA. To your point, they want to set a hard cap. And the biggest teams that are going to struggle with this are teams like the Warriors, right?
Yeah.
Teams that they drafted that currently under the new salary cap, you're able to re-sign with them with exceptions and still be able to go out and bring in additional talent. For example, they've been able to pay Draymond a lot of money. They've been able to keep Clay and pay him a lot of money. Steph Curry makes, $50 million a year. They've been able to keep all three of those guys, somehow still pay Andrew Wiggins, somehow just pay Jordan Poole, and it creates for massive league-wide disparity. There are so many players at the top getting paid so much money that you look at teams like the Spurs that can't even fill a salary cap. They're like, hey, what's the point of us even going and paying this player? We're already not going to win. Why do we go pay DeMar DeRozan $30 million a year if we're at best going to be like a play-in team? So there's already so much league-wide disparity. I think the biggest teams that are going to be impacted are those ones that honestly draft well and are going to be faced with, hey, do we re-sign our guys? Do we re-sign Jordan Poole? I mean, they're not going to be able to if that's what gets passed. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's creating a very interesting situation where to your point, like you could almost draft yourself into financial problems, and it's a situation where you can re-sign with your current team for the most, and so a lot of players are choosing that option. And with the Warriors, it's just like you've seen that success for so long, but if that hard cap does come into play, your team will need to be entirely restructured. So I don't know how the players are ever going to agree to it, though. I don't fully understand it. It's going to need to change shape.
Let's take a step back for a second. The whole reason we're even discussing this new hard cap in part is because with the new TV deals, with what the players in the league collectively are generating, by 2025, there's going to be about $40 or $50 million going to players. NBA players already have the best contracts of any major league sport. They're fully guaranteed.
Yeah.
They're not like NFL contracts where they can get hurt and get canceled, right? So I feel like there's already so much shift in parity towards the player that the biggest thing this is going to impact is the league and the players are going to have to decide, do I want to take less money to stay home or do I want to maximize my dollar and go elsewhere? I think it could be good for basketball. I think it could possibly prevent fewer super teams. I think it could bring back a competitiveness more amongst certain teams. And it is going to give the opportunity for expansion teams to come about. So just keep in mind that 15 players are now going to be sharing $40 million more each year. That's going to help the smallest guys get better minimum contracts. and that's going to help the best guys get massive contracts. So they're already going to be winning. I don't know. That's how I
Yeah.
feel.
Yeah, I guess the way I view it is just the players aren't going to lose. So I don't understand how a lockout won't happen until Adam Silver kind of bends the knee a little bit.
I mean, they're going to have to compromise, right?
Yeah, they're going to have to compromise. I just think that there's really not a large amount of checks and balances because the players are always going to want more. The NBA is growing; it grew at like 15% last year, and so like the players know that new TV deal is coming in a couple of years, and it's like what, like I think it's at least like 3 times larger than the TV deal they have now, and it's. So the players are always going to be asking for more, and
I think as long as the overall pie continues to grow, that they're going to be able to come to some type of agreement. I don't think it benefits anybody for lockouts to occur. So I hope that they figure it out and work together to do it. But, for the overall betterment of the game, for parity, for the benefit of, developing new teams, something like this, I feel like almost has to come about. Compare the Warriors salary to the Spurs and tell me how that's fair in any world. How they have been, based on the rules, allowed to have more than double what the Spurs are paying. I think substantially more than double. I mean, it's ridiculous. They're paying 5 players probably close to $200 million a year. Just 5 players. I mean,
yeah.
I'm not even looking at the numbers, but that's got to be true. Between Draymond Green, Jordan Poole, Steph, Clay, Andrew Wiggins,
Yeah.
it's got to be close to 200 million, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's 214 total what they're paying. It's
The whole team.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Looney's probably getting paid a little bit, but there's not a lot of guys past that are getting big money.
No, but yeah, it's crazy whenever you break down finances like that because there's like you said, just so much disparity, just from the large market teams to the small market teams. These franchises aren't built equal.
And I mean, it could think about it. I mean, think about like Andrew Wiggins, for example. If they didn't have the money to pay him in this hard cap, he's going to have to choose another team. It's going to make another team more competitive. It really would bring basketball to its most competitive core. You wouldn't have 43-point losses like we attended a couple weeks ago when
Yeah.
Spurs got absolutely thrashed by Minnesota. You wouldn't have that as much.
Well,
Not Minnesota, Toronto. I apologize.
I mean, I'm
Toronto.
right there with you. It would create a more competitive environment, but the players are never going to agree with it. They that's why like I'm worried whenever I hear the NBA Players Association talking about there's going to be a lockout before there's a hard cap.
Yeah.
And it's like the hard cap is needed to happen to make things like that a reality. So it's it makes me wonder.
Is the hard cap coming about so that the league can retain more money, or because the league wants more competitiveness?
I think it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B.
If it's because they want more money, a lockout's coming. If it's for other reasons, then they're able to raise the salary cap to a point where, like, hey, look, the salary cap's huge. Y'all are all getting paid more money. You're just not all going to get to play together as much. You're going to have to go to different teams to get that cash. That's what's going to happen. Hopefully,
Yeah.
I think that'd be cool.
I think so too.
And the Spurs might be able to sign a free agent for once.
Yeah, seriously. That would be a pleasant surprise. But yeah, I think we talked that we talked that topic for quite a while. I think salary cap is an interesting discussion, but ultimately it's going to be something that we're just going to have to see and how it unfolds. Cause,
Yep, I agree.
Because we could have a lockout or we could just have an interesting weekend. You never know.
The last lockout in 1999, the Spurs ended up winning the championship. So I'm pulling for another one. Maybe we'll get Timmy D and then go down the road again. Huh?
Hey, well, you never know. Could be our victory year.
I think we're on to one of our last topics of the day. So Rob and I were talking not too long ago, and we were just talking about the kind of era of basketball that we grew up in. And obviously, we're blessed with 5 championships as an organization, but we started talking about
this guy right here.
Yeah, right. Then we started talking about Shaq and Kobe a little bit and how they only got to play together for 5 years with Phil Jackson and kind of what that duo. Phil Jackson got there as their head coach in 1999, and they left after the 2004. So the 3 of them only got to play together and be coached for 5 years. So we were kind of talking about like what that duo could have been and how that sort of stacks up against others. So how do you kind of remember and break down that that breakup, who kind of was at fault, and kind of just how it all played out.
Yeah, it's very interesting whenever you think about Kobe and Shaq breaking up. I think whenever I analyze the past, I kind of have to give a lot of that fault to Kobe.
Damn.
And I hate to phrase it like that because I know there was a lot of hard headedness on both of their sides, and both willing to both kind of unwilling to admit the other one's greatness. But I think whenever Kobe was up and coming with the Lakers, you knew it was Shaq's team. It was Shaq's team when Kobe got there, and it was Shaq's team when they were winning championships. And all you really had to do for y'all to stay together was just say,
Bow to the king.
yeah, pretty much just say, hey, I know it's your team. And just to even imagine suggesting Kobe do that sounds blasphemous, because we know Kobe is an alpha. He is that guy.
He's a guy. He's
Yeah.
the guy.
Yeah, he's like, I'm not gonna, bend the knee to anyone, even if it's Shaq, even if it was what this organization needed to stay together. And that was, to me, sort of an inability in his leadership to kind of overlook the fact that that's exactly what needed to happen in order to keep things together. I think that to me is always going to be a slight blemish on Kobe, because you needed to say Shaq was the best, because he was.
So I see things a little bit differently than you do. And don't get me wrong, Shaq was the best player on that team. The entire time they were together, Shaq was the most important piece. You could clearly see it with their record when Shaq wasn't there versus their record when Kobe would miss games. Shaq was obviously a more important piece, and he was the best player every single year, like I mentioned. Let's fast forward to 2000 a little bit. They just come off their absolute dominant playoff run. I can't remember if they even lost a game. Spurs win in 99. They come back after the lockout year and dominate in 2000, right? What happens in that offseason? Shaq's obviously feeling himself. He gets his first ring. He's the best player in the world by far. He comes into that next offseason, comes in out of shape, right?
Yeah.
And where does Kobe come in? Kobe's also coming in off of his first championship. Kobe's arguably second or third best player in the world at that time.
He
right?
came off of a very poor finals outing that
Regardless, at that time, Kobe was still
fair enough.
Kobe was still regarded as one of the best 5 players in the NBA.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So he comes in the best shape. Shaq comes in out of shape. And although Shaq was the best player, I think Kobe's work in and out every day, his also greatness at the same time, can demand something of Shaq, regardless of if Shaq's the best player. You don't necessarily have to be the best player to be a leader and to demand more of your best player. And I don't think Shaq gave it his all to the same that Kobe did. I think if Shaq worked as hard as Kobe did, we could be talking about Shaq as the best player in the history of the NBA. But we're talking about MJ, because Shaq didn't have the same work ethic that MJ and Kobe did. And it's just a fact. Now, both people said things, and I actually have a quote that I want to read. A quote that Shaq said in the 2000 season. He said, if the big dog ain't me, the house won't be guarded. That was more or less after he called out Kobe. Whenever Shaq got hurt, Kobe was playing a little bit of selfish basketball. He called him out, and they got into a little feud that I feel like Phil Jackson didn't get in between. And Shaq said that comment, and I think that Kobe probably, they're both kind of younger guys. He just couldn't get over it. And I think he says, hey, I'm a big dog too. And if you're not going to put in the same level of work, I'm going to go get it elsewhere. And to Kobe's credit, he got 2 championships without Shaq. He had 2 finals MVPs without Shaq. And he was able to cement his legacy as a top 10 player of all time because of that. But it's crazy because, if they both just were a little bit more mature, you've heard Shaq talk about how he regrets it.
Yeah.
Right? You've heard Shaq talk about how he didn't try as hard and how that's some of his biggest regret that they didn't stay together. What does NBA look like? We don't have, we got those 3 in between, right?
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, they got the 3 in between us, but do we win in 05 if Shaq still has that same work ethic? Do we win in 07? Like, what does that duo look like, and how does that stack up
Yeah.
in like terms of best duo of all time as well?
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about talent wise and how you have a front court and a back court player that are able to bring that much dynamic scoring ability and
Yeah.
just offensive barrage. And both of them are very underrated defenders. And certain, I mean, maybe not Kobe. Everyone knows Kobe's
Right.
defense, but I don't think Shaq gets regarded as nearly the defender that he was. He was very elite. He finished second in Defensive Player of the Year on 2 occasions, I believe.
Earlier in his career, right?
Yeah,
Early, like Magic, early Laker
yeah.
days. Yeah.
Well, one of the years was also in 2000.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That was that legendary 2000 year. That was his other year. He did it,
Freak season.
but yeah, it was absolutely wild. And so, whenever I'm thinking about the best duos of all time, that's the best front court and guard duo of all time.
Well, there's really, if you put it that way, there's not much competition outside of maybe Kareem and Magic. How, so obviously, like I consider the best duo of all time. It's pretty obvious to me, MJ and Pippen,
Yeah.
and that's just because Pippen came in and was like the peanut butter to Shaq or to MJ's jelly or whatever way you want to put it. He came in and they were obviously unstoppable for like a 7-8 year span, more or less. If you didn't take the time away to play baseball, who knows if they get another one, right?
Yeah.
So I just think that although they didn't play different positions, their skill sets still complemented each other incredibly well. Obviously, right? They wouldn't have gotten the results without it. MJ was the ball dominant scorer. Pippen was the do the little things facilitator, rebounder, tough guy. And then obviously you had Rodman, which I think if you look at the Lakers reign, did they ever have a third guy as good as Rodman?
No.
You don't think?
No, not that knew their role. Like not the way that Rodman did. Rodman just never even had to do a thing on the offensive end, and I think that he really thrived in that kind of environment where he was like, "Hey, you can go get the rebound. You're going to play all of your energy on defense, and you don't even have to take a shot."
It's interesting. Like, do you think if they played in today's league and they were as dominant and still won all the championships, it'd be viewed as a trio? Because historically, you look at them and it's like Pippen and Jordan. But like
Yeah.
Rodman was incredibly important. You look at how the Bulls fared against like those early 90s Pistons teams when Rodman was there, and he was a problem for them. He was a big problem.
He was.
I feel like you could almost argue that as a trio. Like Tony Kukoc and Kerr were a very, very distant fourth
Yeah.
on
No,
those championship teams.
I agree. I agree with that wholeheartedly. The only thing that leads me to say that it's more of a duo than a trio is because Rodman was only there for the last three, and so like Pippen was there for all of them. They had that winning consistency even before Rodman got there. They already had
Yeah, they were the
three.
two constants.
Yeah, so it was, did Rodman take them to the next level and allow MJ to sort of just come back from baseball and be like, we're gonna win three more of these, and so like that gave him that next level confidence. But Pippen and Jordan already had that winning chemistry before Rodman got there.
Like who could you even point to as that third guy during the Lakers three-peat? Is Derek Fisher that third guy?
I mean, I think it's a mix of
Him or like
Derek,
Rob Horry?
yeah. I mean, like you had, hate to say it, but like veteran guys like Rick Fox.
Rick Fox is Devin George.
Uh,
Like that's how like it was those two guys and
yeah.
then pure role players.
yeah,
Like I don't like Kobe, although he didn't have Shaq obviously for his last two. Like Pau Gasol was all NBA, top 75. Like he was that guy. People don't realize how good Pau was in his prime.
yeah,
He was. There were times where he was, and I've gotten in trouble with you and other people for saying this. I feel like there was at times where he was as important to those Lakers championship teams as Kobe was. And I'll stand by that. I thought he was that good in those last two. If you look at his plus minus, it actually was better than Kobe's during both championship reigns. Kobe played more minutes, but still. So I thought that was something interesting to note. But like Kobe had more help outside of just Shaq, outside of his second guy on those later teams. I mean, he had Andrew Bynum, who was an all-star one year. I mean, he didn't
Yeah.
do it for a long time, but
Yeah.
He was an all-star, I think, in 2011, 2012. And then Lamar Odom's probably during that few-year period was as good performing as a six-man as the NBA's ever seen.
Yeah.
I mean,
I always liked
his six-man prime was insane.
like Meta World Peace.
How did I even forget about him? I mean, they were a
Yeah.
complete basketball team.
Yeah, he brought that toughness, that defensive identity, and just a guy that you would want in your corner when things kind of got rough. Is Meta World Peace.
Speaking of Meta World Peace, this is funny. I didn't even think we were going to talk about this. I saw an interview lately of Ron Artest, Meta World Peace, where he spoke about being traded after, the kind of Lakers championship reign ended with Gasol and everyone, that he got traded to Sacramento. And I think it was Adelman. I'm trying to remember who the coach was of Sacramento at the time. He's like, I'm not coming. He's like, can I just just kind of act like I'm there, but not be a part of the team? And he was like 275 pounds, ultimately ended up getting back in shape, showing up, got first team all defense, had the Sacramento as like the second best record in the West after the All-Star break. And they ended up making the playoffs. And I just thought that was a really funny story about Meta World Peace that you made me think of. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, he was a big problem too. They were stout. They had a solid team. But yeah,
A lot of guys that definitely knew their roles.
Yeah.
But just to go back to a previous point about some of the best duos that we can appreciate. Who are some other duos that you feel like deserve a little bit of love? I can go ahead and start off with a couple.
I want to hear
just some duos that I feel like are underappreciated.
Okay.
None of these are like the best duos of all time, but I remember loving Gary Payton, Sean Kemp.
Okay.
That duo was sick. Honestly, and then another great duo, obviously, Stockton Malone. I think that when you just look at the amount of offense they produced, they didn't produce the offense in a lot of in interesting ways. A lot of the same plays over and over again, but it's like, it was like clockwork.
Yeah.
And so like there's just a lot of really interesting duos.
It's crazy that I'm being put on the spot. Obviously, like there's Magic and Kareem, but I think we brought them up earlier. That's a little bit of an older duo. I mean, I think an interesting 1-2 punch. You got to bring up the Twin Towers before Manu and Tony came along, right? David and Tim kind of probably had the most accomplished 1-2 punch in the front court in the history of the NBA. Is that safe to say? Even though David was kind of obviously on the decline of his career, he was still all-star caliber player when Tim came in, and then Tim pretty much immediately I think he was first team All NBA as a rookie.
Yeah.
So he was one of the best players in the basketball immediately. So their first couple years together, I mean, I don't think that you've seen anything in the NBA like that from a front court standpoint.
No.
So I think that's a big one. And then, I mean, we've talked in past couple, episodes back about current NBA duos. I don't know if there are any current ones that will really stack up all time unless Giannis wins a couple more.
Yeah.
Kind of how I feel.
Yeah. No, I wholeheartedly agree. There's going to be there's a lot of really great duos, but I would say the league is primarily built around trios rather than duos nowadays.
That's what makes it harder to think. I mean, like every scenario that I want to think of, there's like a third guy that kind of comes into play that I don't want to leave out. Like even when thinking about the Bucks, we've talked about, like I view that more as a trio than a duo.
Yeah.
Still. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's a lot of really good duos. That's a lot of really good topics in general. I feel good about that episode.
I enjoyed talking about the contracts. I enjoyed kind of talking about Westbrook's next steps, and looking forward to kind of getting back together again and filming a couple more of these. Hopefully the next one we'll be able to get AJ. I'll be able to join when AJ is available as well.
3 bums are better than 2.
3 bums are better than 2. So, hey guys, just a reminder, please go ahead and give us a follow on all of our platforms, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, the Baseline Bums Podcast. Also follow my boys page on TikTok. Give a plug for your page.
Yeah, absolutely. At B-Ball Archives, it's your boy Rob. Thanks again for tuning in. It's been a fun episode here at the Baseline Bums Podcast. I have been joined by my homie Adam.
We appreciate you guys.
Absolutely. And as always,
go Spurs, go.
Yeah.